You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
My first guest this morning is David Killeen, the chairman of the Irish Franchise Association. David, start by telling me about how you initially became involved in the world of franchising.
I suppose after a long career in the FMCG sector, I worked for a company called Nokia for a number of years, and after taking a changing career, I went to work for Vantage Wholesale, a small wholesale company in Cork. Would have been instrumental in bringing the Cost Cutter retail brand into Ireland. I was the general manager of the retail brands division at the time, and we introduced Cost Cutter into Ireland. In the year 2000, then I actually was approached by Statoil, who are looking to build a best practice business format franchise model for their fair play retail concept, and they invited me to come on board as their franchise development manager. Fortunately for me, Statoil at the time brought across some significant expertise from the States, who coached and mentored me through the best practice principles. So that's really how I got myself involved in the franchise sector.
So, as I say, you're the Franchise Association chairman at this stage and have been for a number of years. Tell me about the Franchise Association. What does it do?
Well, as an association, Karl, we're a voluntary organisation first and foremost. So people give up their own time to promote ethical franchising. The mission of the Franchise Association is actually to promote to promote best practice franchising and to create an environment within which ethical franchising can grow in Ireland.
So, for those that wouldn't be familiar with the concept of franchising, what's it all about?
Well, I suppose in essence, really, franchising is about if I'm an individual looking to start up my own business and I have a particular interest in a particular sector, and somebody has already established a business, has proven the financial viability of that business, and there's a methodology, a trainable methodology that sits behind how that business gets delivered, I might well have an interest in starting my business by actually running a similar business to that other successful individual. So really, franchising is about me as a franchisee accessing the know-how and the expertise and the experience of somebody who's been successful and run a successful business model, and buying the intellectual property rights, buying the rights, I should say, to their intellectual property with a view to actually running a successful business and replicating their success.
And how does that differ from licensing?
Well, I suppose in essence, I get that question asked quite regularly. Licensing, in essence, is you actually acquire the rights to run your business under somebody else's business model. Franchising actually builds a methodology behind how you actually deliver that customer offer or how you deliver that business model. And most franchisors will develop their franchise systems to ensure that the methodology behind how the business model gets delivered is protected. From a licensing perspective, they tend to just view it in relation to how the brand is protected. So there doesn't tend to be that methodology checks in place.
It's a proven method at this stage, but how far back does franchising go?
The first franchise system that would have been introduced really would have been in relation to Singer sewing machines. And that goes back to the 1920s, where Singer developed this particular sewing machine, and obviously as a way of actually retailing the machines, they actually developed a franchise network.
How successful is the concept, I suppose, if you were to compare it from a statistical perspective into standard business concepts itself, for somebody, let's say, to take on a franchise versus for that same person to go out and start a business themselves from scratch?
Again, Karl, a very good question. And we've done a lot of research. Every 3 to 4 years we do research on the franchise sector. And the most recent report would show that, for franchise businesses, after 5 years, over 90% of franchisees would be successful after 5 years operating under the franchise system. And when you look at the standalone startup numbers, there's less than 50% would be successful. So obviously the franchise model has proven itself to be a lot more substantial and robust, I'd say, than the traditional standalone startup model.
And let's say over the last couple of years we've weathered a serious economic storm. How has franchising weathered that particular period?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we'd take some solace from is that we have not seen through the franchise sector anything like the same levels of attrition that might have been seen in other sectors, and I think that's primarily points to some of the key advantages of franchising, whereby the model has been proven. There's a number of people in the network. People share experiences, they share information. The franchisor supports the franchisees to ensure that the businesses remain sustainable and financially viable.
Is it true to say that most of the franchises that we see operating in Ireland today have originated from the US?
Again, a good question. In fact, in the most recent survey, the interesting thing about the most recent survey is that we've seen a reduction in the number of franchise systems coming into the number of active systems in Ireland that have originated in the States. And the really interesting thing for us really is that between 2006 and 2010, we've actually seen a significant increase in the number of franchise systems operating in Ireland that are actually of Irish origin. So there's a number of Irish entrepreneurs now looking at franchising as a way in which they can develop their business both domestically and internationally.
Well, that's certainly very encouraging. Let's say, for instance, for any business owner that's listening to this morning's show, that would be asking themselves the question, is my business franchisable? Perspective. But what questions do they need to answer, I suppose, in relation to whether their business is franchisable or not?
I think there's a number of things that they need to look at. Primarily, it cuts back to the numbers, because as soon as you make the decision to actually franchise out your business model, you're going to be layering some element of cost into the business. So you really need to be crunching the numbers around the P&Ls to make sure that actually, once you actually set about franchising out that business, that there's sufficient margin in the business model that's going to enable the franchisor to make the necessary return, and also obviously the franchisees to make sufficient return that's going to keep them interested, and also sufficient return to enable them to pay back the initial franchise fee and cover obviously the management services fees and marketing fees if they're applied.
So there are certainly some of the considerations that they should take into account when considering franchising as a model for them to pursue. Yeah,
the other crucial thing obviously is that the franchisor or the prospective franchisor has actually proven that the business model is financially viable. If you're looking for membership of the Franchise Association or even the British Franchise Association, normally the expectation would be that the franchisor would have proven that the business models that are looking to franchise has been successful for a minimum period of 2 years.
That's interesting. Now, has there been many international franchises looking to enter the Irish market over the last number of years?
Again, we would, franchising, when people talk about franchising and retail franchising, traditionally they talk about food service, because obviously they would have been the first franchise concepts to come onto the Irish market. But we have seen a significant increase in the breadth of franchise offerings that are coming into the country at the moment, or even people, as I say, within Ireland who are actually looking to franchise out their own business models. If you take, for example, the home care industry, made an entrance into the Irish market back in 2005, 2006 with a number of American concepts, which actually, that actually generated a whole sector on its own. And we have subsequently seen a lot of Irish people getting into that particular sector as well. So, yeah, it varies. There's a variety of different sectors.
You've mentioned two sectors so far, the care market, as in the home care industry you spoke about, and also the food. Is the concept of franchising more relevant to some sectors than others?
Well, a lot of people would say that anything is franchisable per se. The only probably business model that wouldn't be franchisable would be where it's personality, where the success of the business would be personality linked or personality driven. That said, the essence of franchising really is about having a systemised business model. So if the model can be systemised in such a way and it can be easily replicated and people can be trained up to deliver that model and the finances stack up, well, then the model should be franchisable.
You have vast experience in the sector, having access to it for the last 15 years. How has the model evolved over that period?
I think one of the key things that we're probably seeing is that one of the key essence or one of the key elements to any successful franchise model is down to how the franchisor, the capability of the franchisor to control the customer experience that's been delivered under a brand. So what we have seen is we've seen a lot of the business systems becoming a lot more systemised. A lot of controls been developed. Business management controls been built into the business model, which are trackable. remotely, so as the franchisor can actually stay fully in tune with how the franchisees are performing and how they're delivering their business model to the customers.
David Killeen, the chairman of the Irish Franchise Association, has stayed with us. David, before the break we discussed the characteristics of a franchise business and how the model has evolved over the past number of years. Now I'd like to focus on the relationship between the franchisor and franchisee. How would you describe this?
I remember asking the question, all right, of my advisors at Statoil, and you hear a lot of stuff talking about, franchising is like a marriage, I love you and you love me, and, we'll all get on great. And the Yanks then come in with their own version. They say, franchising is actually, it's a tough love commercial relationship. Now, some people would still say that's a bit like marriage, but it's a tough love commercial relationship. And what it is really is, you have to have somebody who's passionate about your brand. You have to have your franchisee who's passionate about the brand, because one of the obligations of the franchisor is actually to protect the integrity of the brand, not just on their own behalf, but also on behalf of all the other franchisees who have actually invested their hard-earned money in the brand of the franchisor.
And tell me, what's the number one reason for franchisee failure?
By and large, we talked there, 90% of franchisees tend to be successful after a 5-year period in business. Of those that aren't successful, by and large, it's down to the fact that franchisees may run out of money. They may not have sufficient working capital available to them at the very beginning, and that's one of the things that the good franchisors will through a very selective recruitment process will actually identify very early in the process, because it mightn't be about the suitability, or it mightn't be about the personality of the individuals, or their skills, or their aptitudes. It might just be that they don't have sufficient money at the front end.
And I suppose from the consumer's perspective, what should they be looking for in a franchise before investing?
I think there's a number of areas that they need to look to. First of all, they really need to do their due diligence around, who sits behind the franchise model, who are the management team, what are the structures, what are the resources that are in place, how long are they established. Making sure, obviously, that whatever the model that they're looking at is not just fashionable, that there's a longevity in the business model, to make sure that by the time that they're actually up and running in business, and the model obviously provides them, or the success of the business provides them with an opportunity to recoup back their investment costs, their upfront investment costs.
I know there are two costs associated with running a franchise, predominantly the upfront franchise fee and then the ongoing royalty payment. Explain those to me.
Yeah, well, I suppose the initial franchise fee really is the fee to purchase the rights to use the intellectual property and the know-how and the expertise of the franchisor. And that initial franchise fee tends to be split into two parts. One would be the license fee, which permits them to trade under the trademark of the franchisor and to use their IP and know-how and expertise. And the other element of it tends to be what's called the franchise pack fee. So some franchisors will actually provide franchisees with a comprehensive startup pack, including stationery, including business cards, including initial promotional material, etc. So that would be the initial franchise fee. Then the management services fee, really, that's an ongoing royalty fee, or as is now called, management services fee, and that really provides regular income to the franchisor to support the franchise network. And that money would be actually spent, by and large, in putting support resources in place to support the franchise network. And obviously there will be some element of profit in that management service fee. The other fee that might be charged also would be what's called a marketing or an advertising fee, where the franchisees will actually contribute into a central fund, and the franchisor at their discretion will decide as to how that fund gets spent with a view to promoting the brand on a national level. And
are you finding that there's much of a demand out there today from people looking to invest in franchises?
I think we all know what the current economic situations that we find ourselves in, and we all know that I'm sure a lot of your listeners are listening in, knowing of people who have been made redundant, etc., and they may have some element of investment capital available through a redundancy package. There is a lot of interest out there at the moment. There is obviously a lacking in relation to lacking in relation to finance available at this juncture, and we're obviously we're hoping to see an improvement in that as the domestic economy improves.
David, the stats that you gave me earlier in the interview in relation to franchising are certainly very encouraging. How do the banks rate franchising, and are they there to support it?
I think by and large, given the success rate of the franchise model, the banking sector are more open to franchising, to lending on franchising, than somebody looking at a standalone startup business at this juncture. Albeit that through the association, we would hope to see more capital been made available.
Now, I know that you also sit on a government-appointed committee called the Small Business Advisory Group. Tell me about that initiative and what's been done for small businesses from that group.
Well, we did have at last year's franchise awards. We actually had invited the junior minister to attend and to get an understanding as to the type of work that was been done through the association, because we actually had organised the exhibition ourselves last year and the franchise award ceremony. On the basis of that, and on the basis of what he had seen, he actually extended an invitation to the association to actually sit on that small business advisory group. And really what it is, it's an advisory group made up of the likes of the Small Firms Association and ISME and Chambers of Commerce's representatives, etc. So for us to be asked to sit at the table, which is only a recent development for us, is terrific, because it finally gives franchising a voice in relation to development of government policy. And we've actually been asked to submit a number of proposals where we feel that franchising can contribute significantly to getting this country back to work.
And how so?
Well, I think there's a number of initiatives that need to be looked at. I think there's a very interesting initiative that has been worked in the UK called under the banner of Franchise Works, whereby this particular establishment accesses funding from dormant accounts that are lying dormant in the UK. And what the organisation do is they actually purchase franchises on behalf of the unemployed people who come in and then access that particular franchise, and they work very diligently to pay that licence fee back to the fund, with a view to taking somebody who's unemployed and putting them into starting their own business through the franchise vehicle. And the experience has been extremely positive, because any of the feedback that I've been given is that albeit that the franchisees are given the opportunity to pay that initial franchise fee back to the funding group over a period of 5 years, by and large most of them do it within 2. So you get a situation whereby an unemployed person who doesn't have the finance available to them to actually engage in their own business normally, through this initiative, gives them an opportunity to actually start their own business.
Well, David, it's certainly been a very informative interview. Before we finish up, I'd like to just find out, on behalf of listeners, where they can go for more information on franchising. They certainly got a great introduction to it this morning, and it might have whet the appetite in relation to finding out some more to see what opportunities exist out there today. Where can they go next?
Well, I think first and foremost, our annual expo, which is on the 11th and the 12th of October. So there'll be a number of exhibitors there exhibiting their franchises. Actually, this year it's actually being run as a franchise and startup business expo. So I think that'll be the first port of call for people who are actually interested in actually meeting a number of these franchisors face to face. Alternatively, I would obviously recommend anybody who is interested in looking at franchising, be it people who are interested in buying into a franchise as franchisees, or people who are actually looking at maybe the potential to franchise out their business. If they do visit our own website, the www.irishfranchiseassociation.com, there's a wealth of information on the website. There's a number of papers and a number of articles from some of the resident experts who will give plenty of information in relation to how to go about it.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.